You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. And now, it's time for the show that breaks down the options market from unusual activity alerts to market analysis, strategy overviews, listener questions, and much more. If it involves puts and calls, then our all-star panel will break it down. It's time to hit the Option Block with your host, Mark Longo from the Options Insider Media Group, and co-hosts Uncle Mike Tosaw from St. Charles Wealth Management, Mark the Greasy Meatball Sebastian from OptionPit.com, Andrew the Rock Lobster Giovinazzi from OptionPit.com, and Henry the Flowmaster Schwartz from Cboe. The Option Block is brought to you by Cboe. Cboe's suite of S&P 500 index options, SPX and mini S&P 500 XSP options, allows traders to speculate on the direction of the market, generate income, and hedge for downside protection of their portfolio of stocks. No matter what kind of trader you are, there's plenty of useful information to take the guesswork out of creating your portfolio strategy and to help you make more educated moves in the market. Visit www.cboe.com/SPX today to learn more. The views expressed herein are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views of Cboe Global Markets Incorporated or any of its subsidiaries, collectively Cboe. The information provided is for general education and information purposes only. There are important risks associated with transacting in any of the Cboe products or any of the digital assets discussed here. Before engaging in any transactions in those products or digital assets, it is important for market participants to carefully review the disclosures and disclaimers contained at www.cboe.com/US_disclaimers. These products and digital assets are complex and are suitable only for sophisticated market participants. These products involve the risk of loss, which can be substantial and, depending on the type of product, can exceed the amount of money deposited in establishing the position. Market participants should put at risk only funds they can afford to lose without affecting their lifestyle. And now, get ready to hit the Option Block.
All right, everybody. That music means we are back. It is Thursday. Did you miss us on Monday? Well, we're back here for your regularly scheduled Thursday episode of the old OB. My name, of course, Mark Longo from theoptionsinsider.com, as well as from the network upon which so many of you folks are binging. And, you know, a mere less than 24 hours ago, it was a question mark whether I'd be able to talk at all today. I was going under the knife at the oral surgeon this time yesterday, so wasn't sure how much talking I could do today, but so far, so good. I am powering through, listeners, but we'll probably play it safe today on the side of caution. Maybe we'll lean towards a little more flavor, a little more sprinkle of Uncle Mike and the Flowmaster today, and a little less me on the old Mike. Probably good for the long-term recovery. Of course, if you want to check out everything we've got cooking, make sure you subscribe to the full network on wherever you get your podcasts. And if you want to go pro, theoptionsinsider.com/pro is the place to go. As we go around the horn and welcome on the aforementioned Uncle Mike, we'll start with him, Uncle Mike Tosaw from St. Charles Wealth Management. Uncle Mike, you missed our big fantasy football draft on, what was it? Tuesday. But you participated by proxy, and looks like the computer actually auto-drafted you. A pretty darn good team. You are currently number one in the power rankings. Now, that said, the AI is favoring its own picks, clearly. But still, how do you feel about your team, sir?
I feel pretty good about it, actually. I think we're going to be in a good spot. I absolutely love the nickname that you gave me. Food for thought. If you're ever in a fantasy football league with Mark Longo, make sure you show up for the draft, or you might not get the nickname that you would have chosen.
I'm just saying, you missed the draft, you pay the price, and that is the price in your case. You now love crypto, sir.
Very fair. I deserve it. I will take ownership of that.
All right, and he didn't play in our fantasy draft, but I'm sure he's watching the results with bated breath. None other than the Flowmaster himself, Mr. Henry Schwartz from Cboe East. Mr. Flowmaster, welcome back to the show, sir.
Hello, everybody. Happy to be here. No, I'm not in the fantasy pool, but I will observe and maybe try to learn enough to play next time.
All right, then, with the team assembled, let's dive right on into the trading block.
It's time to break down the latest topics, trades, and trends in the world of options. It's time for the trading block.
All right, everybody, welcome to the trading block, the portion of the show where we break down what the heck is trading out there. And, we've been off for a week. We saw a lot of drifting in the market since our last show, mostly to the downside. We did drift as low as, looks like threatening the 63.5 level in the S&P, are pretty darn close to it. That was earlier in the week. Later sessions coming into today, we've seen more green on the screen, and that is the case today, up about 0.5%, pretty much across the board. Excuse me, in most of the major indices. That means our old pal VIX Cash did drift higher earlier in the week. We did kiss a 19 handle ever so briefly earlier this week, coming back to earth now, 15 3/4. That still puts it up about 1.5 points from where we were. Remember, going back to last Thursday, no show on Monday. VVIX at about a 96, up 4 points from where it was this time last show. The high got a little bit north of 100, about 104 earlier this week when all the red was on the screen. That said, let's go around the horn. Uncle Mike, sir, we will start with you. What is catching your eye out there in the markets? And as I said to the Flowmaster before the show, feel free to extemporize at length, sir.
You know what? I was just thinking when I woke up this morning, I need to do some lengthy extemporizing.
Every once in a while, you got to get it out.
So this has been a very interesting week in that we come in after the Labor Day weekend and the S&P just gets clobbered on Tuesday. We hit, as Mark was saying, we hit a low of 63.60, I'm showing. And so at that point in time, buyers came in. And we have a very narrow range in our market overall, in that if right now 65.08, that was the all-time high. We hit that on the 28th of August. And so we pull back a little bit. And then right now we're at a stage to where, I guess theoretically it could happen on the show. We're roughly a little over 30 points off of the all-time highs again today. And so it seems that every time sellers take on this market, buyers come in and buy it. We keep staying right by these all-time highs, but we can't quite break through them in any major way, so to speak, or at least for the last couple of months we can't. And so you need to be very careful in markets like this. And right now, when we have a VIX priced back in the 15s, we got to the 19s, I believe it was on Monday. We have it in the 15s, and you can argue whether it's high or low. That's an argument for probably something on vol views. But the point is that if for some reason we do have some type of chaos, and all of a sudden the S&P goes down to 5,900 or 5,800, and the VIX goes up to 40, 50, or 60, the VIX doesn't seem that expensive now at 15 if it were to go to those levels. And the S&P doesn't seem all that great if it were to go down back below 6,000. Now, the reason I bring up these numbers is because this is where we were back in April. We're not that far from that time frame. And it did not take us long to get down to those levels back in April. And all of that was headline risk. And where I'm going with this is that we do still have a lot of headline risk with where we are in the marketplace now. course, there's always the debate on when you're near all-time highs, should you buy the new all-time high? Because if the market's making new all-time highs, it's making it for a reason. Or should you sell it because, well, there's never been a better time in the history of the market to sell, of course, if that's the case. So that's the big debate. But what I say is that, of course, I'm bullish. I'm always bullish. I'm either bearish for me is not quite as bullish. That's how I'm bearish, is when I'm not quite as bullish. But with that being said, I think the second half of what I say all the time of being short-term cautious is something that really needs to be taken into account in whatever way with which you do it. Now, in terms of some of the names that are sticking out right now, or of what's happening today, we are getting a lot of movement in the technology sector. Just some of the names that just pop out right away. We have Astera Labs up 4.5%, Credo Technology up almost 9%. Netflix up 2%, Meta, aka Facebook, up just under 1.5%. So we're getting some tech-driven names that are really pushing this thing up. But if you look at the overall tech sector, XLK, that's pretty much flat on the day. And so the reason for that, some of the bigger names, the fruit company, Apple, down 0.25% on the day. Microsoft is relatively flat on the day. So the bigger names are not necessarily pushing this as much as, I mean, Netflix, of course, is a bigger name, but like the bigger names in general are not pushing this market up. So we're really not getting a ton of movement in terms of where the major technology companies are moving, which is what's been driving up this market in a lot of ways. Now, the big mover on the day today for the sectors would be the financials. XLF is up 0.8%. And then just looking at some of our stocks that we have in there, JP Morgan crossed over the 300 mark today. So we are getting some movement in the financial sector. But with anything, S&P 500 is only up 0.4% on the day. That doesn't really feel like that much given the movements with which we've had over the course of the last couple of years. The other thing to take note of is that we have silver. Silver was making some new longer-term highs yesterday. It's pulled back a little bit today, but silver has been moving again with where we are. So how does gold and silver factor into inflation? Not in the same ways with which it used to, of course, but this could be an indicator of where we are and what the Fed's going to do next time. The markets seem to think the Fed's going to lower rates next time they meet, but I don't necessarily think that I'm still in the camp of that may or may not happen, if that makes any sense, because they're still walking the fine line in that you don't want unemployment, but you also don't want inflation either. So that is what I'm seeing. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Excellent extemporizing, sir. Well done. Let's see if the Flowmaster can match that feat. Mr. Flowmaster, sir, obviously we've been off for a week, so a lot going on earlier this week before we got to today. Anything catching your eye there? Then what's catching your eye in today's markets, sir?
Well, you said something that, the market's been kind of drifting, and that really is exactly the case. In fact, I looked at where we were during showtime a week ago. I think we were within about 10 or 11 handles of where the SPX is right now. So it's been kind of a sideways market. And, as Mike mentioned, we started out the week with a bit of a sell-off, and yeah, people got a little bit spooked, but as I said last week, because we're at the same level, the S&P's up 10% year to date. It's only September, so we still got some room. Basically, I feel like people are kind of comfortable. They're sitting on some gains. So, a move of 1 or 1.5%, we get a little bit of some people get a little bit spooked, but then, as Mike said, the buyers sure come in, and that's, that really is what we're seeing. Today was kind of the same deal. Like we sold off a little bit, and then all of a sudden it's like, nope, we're going to go up. So, I also did a little write-up of kind of the index performance last month, and last month was really pretty interesting because S&P was up about almost 2%, but Russell was up 7% last month, and that, that's really very unusual, right? Russell's, the small cap names, they're a little bit more interest rate sensitive. As Mike said, we probably have a rate cut coming, but there, remains all sorts of brouhaha going on in terms of, the makeup of the Fed and the control of the Fed. So, it is kind of, we really are just kind of drifting, right? And VIX around, under 16, so it's relatively mellow in terms of vol. And we do have employment tomorrow, so I think that, you might see kind of, a little bit of choppy action just because I do think that, people are a little bit nervous. Not, headline risk and, just the fact that we've had a very strong rally. Valuations are really pretty high as most people know, at least by most of the metrics that people pay attention to. So, low vol, we're up 10% on the year. I think it's a really nice time to kind of look for some hedges. And even if you just sit on the bid, you never know. We get a couple whipsaw moves and you'll get filled in a nice position that just kind of complements what your core portfolio. And, market continues to be very busy. I just refreshed numbers. We're running 57.8 million contracts a day is the average for the year. August was looking really strong for volume at the beginning of the month, but it did kind of quiet out towards the end. So plenty going on. There really is some pretty interesting sector and commodity action as well. And I kind of feel like it's the sweet spot in terms of vol's not too low and it's not really too high either, for trades to work both ways, right? Whether you're kind of getting into something long or you're trying to harvest some premium, just depends on how you pick your spots and really how you manage those positions.
Since you brought up August, let's hit that now. The numbers hot out of the gate from our friends over there at OCC for August. And, despite the Flowmaster downselling it, still was a pretty impressive month. Up 18.3%, over $1.25 billion. Yes, 1.26 billion contracts with a B. It seems wild, Henry, that 1 billion contract mark in a month seemed unattainable. Not that long ago. We were at about exactly that a year ago in August, Henry. And now it seems like 1 billion. If you don't hit 1 billion, people will say pshaw. Isn't that crazy?
About it, like when we had 2 or 3 or 4 in a row, and we were like, "Wow, this really is amazing." But you're right. If we get a month where it's lighter than that, people will actually probably start to panic a little bit and say, "What's gone wrong?" So, but what's really great to see is we know when we get a month like April that the volume is going to be insane because when markets get really really volatile, there's a lot of kind of re-hedging that has to take place, and people trade because they have to, not necessarily because they want to. So that's normal. But when we get a month like August where volatility was really actually, after we popped, we touched 20 in the first day of the month, and then we never got near it again. So to have a month where there's not a lot of volatility and still have that kind of volume is really spectacular. It really shows you that a lot of the traders, whether they're institutional or retail or pro-tail, they're coming back. They're doing things that they like the performance of, or they like the concept of, the kinds of things that we see in the zero DTE world, where they may just kind of sell a structure every day or every 20 minutes sometimes, and that's really kind of what's driving the volume is repeat business, which is great.
Yeah, some of the other numbers here from August, listeners, again, up 18.3% year over year. Equity options leading the charge, up 30%. That's very interesting. Very good to see that. That obviously indicates a lot of individual retail flow is still healthy out there. ETF options only up 5.5%. Index options, which have been, the tip of the zero DTE spear, up 6.9%. So again, a lot of that growth coming from the old plain vanilla equity options. VIX futures continuing to take it on the chin, off 34.5%, which is kind of wild. You know what else is kind of wild is curveball. Let's see if the Flowmaster can handle reading some of the data from his own platform. Mr. Flowmaster, think you're up for it?
I should be able to do that, yeah.
All right, there you go. All hand curated from the Trade Alert platform. Have at it, sir.
All right, so we're talking the most actives in terms of
yes. Start with VIX and work your way down. If you want to talk about also the top trades in VIX, that's there for you. We also have a little flash poll if you want to mention that. Have at it, sir. The floor is yours.
Sure. So, as I said, VIX is 1564 right now. The October 22nd 15 puts are the most active with 41,000 of them. We got 30,000 of the SEP 17th 20 puts as well. A lot of puts. In fact, I'm looking at the top 10. There's only 2 rows that are called. And let me see if there's any kind of real standouts in terms of the block sizes. The Oct 15 puts, that's a 40,000 lot block at 19 cents, part of a package. Let's just see what the other side of that was. So it's it looks a little bit like a VIX put fly. In fact, it was the Oct 22nd. 13.5, 15, 16.5 put fly was bought. I'm going to go with it was sold for 33 cents. Looks to me like it opens. Possibly they seller of the wings and buying those 15 puts. It's possible they're actually rolling out of the 15 puts. But that's by far that's the biggest trade on what's otherwise a relatively a little bit below average day, only 500,000 contracts or close to that trading in VIX today versus an average daily volume of 800,000. Looks like we'll probably hit about 700,000 on the day. Looking at just market wide in terms of the most actives across the board, SPY is approaching 5 million contracts. But again, this is overall market wide. We're looking at average of around 53 million contracts today, unless things get spicy in the last 2 hours or so. That's about 9% below average, and everything's a little light. Single stock is about 4% running below average. The ETF's around 13%. Index is about 5% light. So. In fact, the only sector that's really running above normal, cyclicals are kind of on pace for average, and it's telco and utilities that are kind of heavy. Utilities is a very light sector. There's not that much in that sector to begin with, and in telco, let's see what's the driver in there? 230,000 contracts trading in ASTS, which I think is AST Space Mobile. I don't know what it is, but
that's one of those YOLO space names that was hot. I'd say 6 months ago, maybe hot again today, sir.
Yeah, you know what? Speaking of YOLO names, I did see Open Door is in the top 10. It's actually so far 730,000 contracts have traded in Open. This one I think I mentioned. My brother scalped around in his Robinhood account. That stock's at 568 right now, though, so it's up 10%. Remember that was a 50-cent stock about 6 weeks ago. So that's kind of what the order flow looks like today. I would kind of say just we are with S&P up 0.5%, VIX down about a little bit more than half a point. It's definitely more green on the screen than otherwise, but there are pockets where it's a little bit mixed.
All right, listeners, that's your Flowmaster rundown for this week. Flipping the script out there a little bit as we head on into the Odd Block.
It's time to break down the most interesting, unusual, and downright questionable options activity that's been identified by theoptionsinsider.com. It's time for the Odd Block.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Odd Block, the portion of the show where we get weird, we get wild. Sometimes we unleash the Flowmaster, especially on Thursdays. and he gets weird and he gets wild for us. Let's see what's he got on the docket for us today. This first one looks like a bit of a newcomer. This is certainly not one I've discussed before. NiSource Inc., ticker symbol NI. This is utility, Columbia Gas, and the NIPSCO brands. So it's a utility, I guess, out of northern Indiana. So I should have heard of it. It's not that far from Chicago, but not familiar with NiSource. I've heard of Nicor. But either way, NiSource hitting the tape today. Selling off a bit, about $2.50 or nearly 6%, trading 39 1/3 right now. On the year, it's been a decent year, though. It was 33 1/4 a year ago. So it's up $6.15. It did get higher. It got up to about $43 back at the beginning of August. So exactly a month ago, it was 43 1/3. So it has come off a bit off the highs, especially over the last, just this week, it was $42 and now selling off a bit. But even with the sell-off, it's still a pretty decent year, up nearly 20%. So not a bad year, a bad day, but not a bad year out here for NiSource. That said, Mr. Flowmaster, what'd you spot out here?
Yeah, so this is an interesting one. I have not traded it in the past. I think they're like a coal. They're as you said, it's a utility company, but I think their main business is natural gas pipelines and maybe a coal-fired power plant. Some of the old traditional fossil fuel activities, which are under this administration, I guess, in better shape than they were before. What I noticed basically was that the option volume is 20 times normal. Okay, this is really not a very active name. Usually only trades about 482 contracts a day. Today already it's traded 16,000 contracts. And as you said, it's having a chunky sell-off of around 6% on the day. But there are a few big blocks. And what kind of struck me was the timing looks pretty sweet. So the first thing that printed was a buyer of some step 40 puts when the stock was at 40.66 in the morning. They paid they swept 1,800. They paid like 58 to 60 cents. Stock continued to sell off, so those turned out to be pretty good. I think they got up to about 80 cents. And where the stock is now, we're $1.25 below that. But then later, around lunchtime, some of the call buyers came in. So the step 40 calls, 2,300 of those were bought for 65 cents. That's when the stock was $1 lower than it was in that early put purchase. So with the stock 39.52, somebody paid 65 cents for 2,300 of the step 40 calls. So kind of just based on the fact that the option prices are similar, the block sizes are kind of similar. This feels to me like the same customer is kind of playing it. And then the last trade, there was another call buyer, somebody paying $1 for 3,000 of the OC 40 calls. That was around lunchtime also. Stock was at 39.19. So it looks to me like somebody kind of scooped up some puts on the sell-off, but then they really flipped around, and it's definitely overall bullish at this point. Might be worth kind of some sort of a long view, whether it's in the stock or maybe in the form of a risk reversal, bullish collar. I mean, vol's up about 5 points, but that put call skew is a little bit steeper as well. So but the way this thing is trading today, it makes it look to me like somebody actually thinks it's got a decent chance to rebound. And I mean, given the kind of the politics that are out there, it seems to be a decent thesis in terms of a bullish play.
This sounds like a bit of a Flowmaster nibble to me. Is that the case, sir?
Yeah, actually, I have punted around the stock today and done okay. So just because it's just choppy, it's all over the place. The market in general, even though kind of we're just having a sideways, week or so, the market is a little bit choppy. We were looking at the S&P range. I mean, we were down around 64.59 or so in the futures, and then a high of 64.89, which is where we are kind of right now. That's 30 points of range is pretty decent considering what the realized volatility lately has been, kind of barely 10%.
All right, let's keep the fun going. This time, let's go out to a name we haven't talked about in a while. This is our old pal, MobileEye Global, a.k.a. MobileEye, MBLY. You know them. They are the autonomous driving company based out of Israel, but they obviously have U.S. operations as well. Trading 1470, up about exactly $1 today, or 7.25%. So sounds like good news on the autonomous driving front. I'm not sure what's driving it today outside of more buyers and sellers. Maybe one of the big autonomous names is using a lot of their offerings, whatever the case may be. A good day for MobileEye out there today. On the year, also a good day. In fact, today's move, they were flat on the year until today. Now they're net up about $1 on the year, or a little over 7%. So it's all today's move. Interesting. If you had bought it a year ago and until this morning, you were flat. You did have a few moments. They topped out, looks like 22.5 back right at the start of the year, January 3rd. Interesting. They kind of rocketed to start the year and then immediately fell off a cliff. By January 10th, they were trading 15 2/3. So wild start to the year for MobileEye. And then since then, they've kind of flirted with a little bit more highs. They sold off to, looks like about 11 3/4 on the big April meltdown. So about $3 south of where they are right now. They rallied it again to about $19 on July 3rd before selling it off. So they've had a few runs at upside, haven't been able to really sustain anything. That said, Mr. Flowmaster, what'd you spot out there in MobileEye today, sir?
So this was just a distinct big bullish call buyer. October 15 calls. Somebody bought 5,144 of them around 12:37 New York time. That's when the stock was 14.23. These are opening. They got a pretty nice execution. Our Theo value shows that are worth around 70 cents, even though the quote was pretty wide, 59 cents at 74 cents. So that's when the stock was 14.23. Stock is, as you said, it's a little bit higher now, 14.70-ish, and these are trading 98 cents. So that's a 36% gain just in the last about almost exactly an hour. So that's not a shabby trade at all. This is another one that I think is kind of I'm going to punt the stock a little bit, just because it's a very clear directional trade. I don't know, what their time horizon might be. There's also a buyer of 3,400, the OC14 calls a little bit more recently, like in the last 20 minutes or so, paying like 125 to 128. That's another pretty big trade. That's a chunky piece of premium. Stock was 14.40 when those calls were bought. So, it's just, in aggregate right now, 36,000 calls have traded, which is 11 times normal for the name versus just 5,300 puts. Volatility is higher, which is kind of a side effect of people coming to buy options. And then if we look at the skew, which is kind of how we kind of discern a little bit of sentiment out of the option flow, basically we see the vol increases are a little bit bigger on the call side than the put side in terms of the out-of-the-money options. So just looking at like the October, you've got the out-of-the-money calls up around 2 points, the 25 delta line to 53.4 vol versus the 25 delta puts, which are just 52.3. And so the fact that the calls have a higher vol than the puts, we see this in meme stocks. We see it in anything where there's kind of a speculative bias and a bullish bias to the flow. So, it's another case of, pretty clear cut directional flow. You can kind of think about playing it any way you want, whether it's a short-term trade or whether you kind of do a longer-term kind of lean. But I kind of like this one, and the fact that I saw a Waymo car parked on my street in New York City, or at least pulled over. There was a driver in it, though. I think in New York they're still just training them. But certainly happening, and it's an interesting one. Obviously, if the self-driving vehicles is a good kind of story type of stock industry. So that's why I kind of like this one.
Yeah, it's funny. They're doing this obviously to save on the workforce, but right now with the regulations, you have to have a driver and then like a safety person, I think, in the car as well. So you're doubling your staff for the sake of efficiency, which always makes me laugh as we keep on rolling out to our final name from today, unless we throw an extra one. We'll see. Let's go out to a name we haven't talked about in a long time. This is ArcelorMittal. You know them. They're the steel name out of Luxembourg. Trading about 33 bucks today, up about a third or about 1%. We know steel's been a wild category this year with all the threats of imports and everything going on domestically on the steel front with that deal for U.S. Steel. A year ago, the stock was 22 bucks, so again, up 11 bucks, so they've had a good year. They flirted with a few other levels. They got up to about 33, almost 34 bucks once back in March, and then promptly fell off a cliff. April 8th, they bottomed out at right around 23.5 bucks. Then they fought up to above this level back in July, almost 35 bucks, 34 and 3/4. Fell off a cliff again on August 4th, down to about 30 bucks exactly. Since then, they have climbed their way back up about 3 bucks to where they're hanging out right now, 33 bucks. So interesting year, net up, about nearly 50%, almost exactly 50% on the year. So you can't really complain if you're holding a little MT stock out there. And let's see what our Eye of Sauron spotted for us today. It looks like somebody feeling a little more of that upside love. They came in this morning. They said, OC 40s, how are they? They got a nickel at 15 cents. So all things considered, not a terrible market for this. They said, you know what, good sirs, I will trade 10,000 for 13 cents. The stock was a little bit lower, 32.84. So they got a little over 20, about almost a 25-cent pop in the stock, working in their favor right now. They do not get earnings. Earnings are on November 6th. So if they wanted a little bit of earnings pop, they needed to go out another month. That said, the 40 handle, that's a lofty level. It's topped out at about 35 bucks a couple of times and retreated this year. So 40 bucks seems like a fairly impressive move, all things considered. This is another one of those trades where, yeah, you could buy these and maybe you get there, but also if you do get there and settle out right at 40, these calls are worthless and you'll be mad that you missed out on $7 on the stock. So I kind of wonder if something a little bit meatier is not the better way to go if you were so inclined. But that said, Mr. Flowmaster, sir, what are your thoughts on these OC 40s? And as you dig into your magical Flowmaster tools, your toolbox, sir, what are your thoughts? Do you think they did buy these?
Well, it's my tool belt, and it's funny. This one is a little bit interesting, actually. And I just hit up a contact that I know on the trading floor on the Amex, which is where these actually traded. So as you said, 10,000 of these OC 40 calls, and they're 21% above spot. But what's interesting is I see a block of 50,000 shares of stock trading at almost the same time. So I'm kind of wondering, maybe there's some sort of connection here. We'll see if we get a show. It is a weird one to be selling because you're not getting very much for it, especially after on the 10,000 lot, they're paying some commission there. I don't really know what to make of this trade. If it's tied to the stock, guess you could have somebody getting out of the stock, and I don't really know I don't know. It's a 13-cent call. That's 21% out of the money. I'm not sure there's any reason to trade that one very often. But, they've got October. They've got a couple months for it to work. If I get an update from the floor, I will let you know. But currently, this one's a little bit mysterious. It is an odd block, as the segment is called.
Aptly named segment. Yeah, the only thing I really like about this is the duration. I don't really like anything else. I don't like the strike. I don't like the price, especially for selling. You're right. It just doesn't resonate. But maybe you folks think differently. Maybe you think that's a cheap bite at the upside apple in good old ArcelorMittal. Since we have the Flowmaster here, we got a couple extra minutes. Let's do a quick Flowmaster payoff, listeners, because he's always breaking down flow for us on the show. He just did it again today. We have a lot we're tracking. Let's pay some of them off. Let's go back all the way to April 24th. We're all so young and innocent, just in the early teeth of this post-Liberation Day rally that we were all about to embark on there. The great migration north, shall we say. And at the time, the Flowmaster was talking about a name that's been on our top 10 quite a bit since then. It's SoFi. at the time, let's see, where was the stock back when Mr. Flowmaster was talking about it? It closed, this was the April 24th show. Stock closed at $12.31 that day. So you can already guess, just stock alone's been a good run for them. SoFi trading $25.16 today, so up another 2/3 of a buck today. So SoFi's been on the rampage of late out there, listeners. But back on April 24th, the Flowmaster was profiling almost 2,000, about 1,874 of the 11 half calls. These were expiring in the weeklies, May 9th. And somebody came in and scooped them for $1.34 when the stock was trading $12.19. So we thought it was an interesting kind of meaty call trade at the time. Again, 70-cent in the money calls. You're paying $1.34 for them, so you're paying 64, pretty much 65 cents over for them out there. So interesting. It seemed kind of aggressive, and we noticed that looked like these kind of worked out. Stock, as you can probably guess from what I just told you, the stock closed higher on expiration, $13.18. These were all pretty much still open. So looks like Mr. Flowmaster, our friend, got himself a winner, sir. What do you think?
Well, I was just looking at it. I mean, that stock has doubled between April and now. So the question is, did they keep the stock?
Yeah, if they held the stock, they're looking even happier. Yes.
Yeah, that's a pretty good one. I mean, that SoFi is one of these, I guess kind of financial firms, kind of fintechy, kind of targeted for the younger generation. And so, they get a lot of traction. I'll tell you, I did get confirmation from my floor broker that was an outright 13-cent call buyer in MT. So maybe the stock block was unrelated. It just happened to print at the same
exact
moment.
Same time.
I don't know. I mean, 50,000 shares versus 10,000 contracts. I mean, or maybe they went into both and they really, and it's an aggressive way to get long. It's a little funky, but the SoFi, that's a pretty sweet trade, to go for a stock to go from 12 to 25. I love to kind of take an example of an option trade and really look at the return on the options trade versus what the return on the underlying would have been, because that's really where you can illustrate kind of the power of options and one of the reasons people like to use them is you can get multiples of the return. There's a trade-off, right? The trade-off is generally called theta, but this is one where the signal was obviously great, and if they held the stock, then they're really looking at some nice gains.
Yeah, it's been a wild time in good old SoFi, and it's always a wild time when you folks weigh in. So let's get to the mail block.
It's time to take your seat on the All-Star panel as we read your emails, tweets, Facebook messages, website comments, and much more. It's time for the Mail Block.
All right, everybody, let's do it. Mail block time. Let's start with the flash poll I hinted at earlier. We said right now that big block in VIX, what's dominating the tape, 40,000 of the OC15 puts going up for 19 cents. Does seem like that 15 put strike, it just captures a lot of imagination day in, day out. We talk about SEP 15s a lot. Now we got OC lighting up the tape. So we said, quite simply, 19 cents, gun to your head, which way you going. We're not doing any verticals or anything like that. You're just straight buying them or you're straight selling them. And right now, it looks like a bunch of you cannot make up your minds. We are once again hanging out almost exactly 50-50 for you want to buy them, you want to sell them. I guess that's what makes up a market, listeners. And I can see an argument for both. I mean, we've had a little difficulty maintaining much time below the 15 strike. It is October. They call it Rocktober for a reason, So there could be some vol in the air. We did just kiss a 19 handle earlier this week in the VIX cash. So I could see some folks being reticent to buy those. On the flip side, we did break through that 15 handle quite a few times just in the last few months. Hadn't really stayed there too long, but it's an interesting one. I said before, I thought maybe the 15 strike was maybe a bit of a bridge too far, but Interesting stuff. You're getting some duration. I did like, there were the D's 15s we were talking about going up for 24 cents earlier. I think it was a week or two ago. I think gun to my head, I probably would go that way. Obviously, for a nickel, you're getting a lot more duration on top of it. So interesting stuff out here. Just obviously, you folks have a hard time making up your minds on these polls. I can't say I blame you. Oh, speaking of which, speaking of the listeners and stuff, Mr. Flowmaster, I have a question for you, because you were invoked in our pro member chat a couple of days ago. We were talking about, I think it was on our Options Bootcamp show. We had a question about open interest and why it can't update more than once a day. And I was debating that with our good buddy, Mr. Passarelli there, Mike's nemesis in life. And the chat brought up that they said they think the flow, we were debating why we can't have, open interest updated instantaneously. And our chat brought up that they said they think the Flowmaster, he can see behind the curtain, and you get more frequent OI updates because you have insight into the Cboe, sir. So can you dispel that myth once and for all? Or can you peek behind the curtain like the Wizard of Oz, sir?
It was a good question. No, we do not have any better access to real-time open interest than anybody else. The way an exchange works when you have the common clearing that OCC provides is we basically just fire the trade over to OCC with the information needed to identify the clearing firm, and they do all the clearing, and we have no idea what's happening in terms of the netting out at that once it's there. So we do not know. I will say though that there are some techniques that that we use to estimate kind of existing net positions, and you've heard me talk about the open close data set, which basically breaks out customer buying minus selling, and it does include opening and closing columns, which basically help you do some calculations. It's still an estimate. So if you see that customers net bought 20,000 calls to open and they net sold 8,000 to close, you can say, well, there's 12,000 remaining. There's 12,000 open. You don't know if that's one customer or a bunch of customers, or if the buyer was the same as the seller. But you can do a lot of kind of sleuthing, I guess, to kind of make good estimates, and it works very well in the 0DTE world, where most of the activity trades on the final day of expiration and there's very little incoming open interest. And when you have kind of both of those things, then it does work pretty well to just effectively tally up the opening buyers minus the closing sellers, and then plus the opening sellers minus the closing buyers, and you end up with a number, and that number is a pretty good estimate for the market position. And I've shown some demos of this. I mean, it's really pretty interesting, right? Because the 0DTE SPX trades close to like 1.6 million contracts a day, and you may see 100,000 contracts trading at a single line, right? So if the market's at whatever 6,400, the 6,400 calls, you may see 90,000, 95,000 contracts trade. But if you subtract the closing from the opening, what we typically see is the kind of the net positions which are being managed by the liquidity community is almost like less than 10% of that. So, we end up with maybe 7,000 contracts net. The other place that can be pretty interesting is when you look at some of the large vertical spreads. If you heard if there's Google Captain Condor, there's some reporting on a Condor seller in very large size, and it kind of stands out. And so the concept of real-time open interest is exactly the same thing. You can basically, now you can get this data in 1 minute slices, which is kind of wild. So you can basically say, okay, I'm going to track on a minute by minute basis the buying minus the selling, or the opening buying minus the closing selling. And so you come up with the best possible estimate of the real-time open interest. But I've talked to OCC about, maybe them doing, an open interest transmission more often than just once after everything's cleared. And it's not a big priority for them. So, they're they're clearing, millions of trades a day, and the kind of data output is not their priority. So, I doubt that we're going to see it. I know that they're in the process of rolling out a new clearing platform called Ovation, I believe, which they've been working on for almost a decade, and that doesn't handle anything along the lines of real-time open interest. So we can keep asking, but what's exciting to me is you have data vendors, including Cboe, who take the available data and some the best possible kind of practices in terms of estimating what is effectively the current open interest at any moment in time, and doing some pretty neat things with that. So, but the real answer is no. We do not have any better view into that than anybody else. But there are ways to estimate it using the available data.
I tried to tamp down those rumors yesterday. I said, the Flowmaster is not a wizard, but I thought better to come from the horse's mouth. And you're right. I get the same impression from OCC. I've asked them that exact same question many times, and the answer I always get is never exactly enticing. That said, as 0 day continues to grow, those calls are only going to get louder for at least an intraday OI update. So we'll see how that progresses as we keep on rolling, listeners, and go around the block.
It's time to tell you what we'll be watching on our trading screens until the next episode. It's time for Around the Block.
All right, everybody, welcome to Around the Block, the portion of the show where we do just that. We tell you what we're keeping an eye on until our next episode. Let's go out to Uncle Mike Land first. Uncle Mike, sir, what are you keeping an eye on until the Monday episode?
Well, I think we need to continue to monitor the all-time highs with where they're at this stage, or the near all-time highs with where we are right now. So continuing to watch that. Definitely keeping an eye on silver. It's making a kind of a little bit of a run. It's pulled back a little bit today, not much, but silver might be the thing to watch. Of course, you got to watch bonds in this marketplace with the Fed. The rumored rate cuts that may or may not happen. And you get watching headline risk as well.
Mr. Flowmaster, same question for you, sir. What are you keeping an eye on till you beam in next week from the craps tables in Vegas?
The macro picture for sure, and employment numbers tomorrow morning. See if we get any kind of move. There's not much in the way of earnings anytime soon, so we can kind of take a break on that. I think I'll be kind of looking around for, I like the unusual options flow is definitely, things have been working pretty well lately in trying to pick some spots, and really just trying to find some interesting trades and put them on and manage them. At the Robinhood Summit, which is where I'll be next week in Vegas, I'll actually be they're doing some live trading, and I'll be outlining an SPX Condor trade and just kind of showing the behavior. And because it is a very popular retail trade, they love it. And so that's what I'll be up to.
All right, that music means we're up to no more show, at least for this show. But don't worry, listeners. If you need more show in your lives, and who doesn't, and you also could use a little extra taste of Uncle Mike in your life, well, stay tuned. TWIFO coming up a little bit after this show if you're hanging out in the Pro. I'll be joined by the Uncleist of Mikes to talk all things futures options in a little bit. Then, of course, the hot options report after that. But before we go, the Flowmaster, he said Iron Condor, but that's really code for a roll in the bones at the craps table. What are you? Are you a pass, don't pass guy, horn high yo, place him on the 5 and 8? Well, what kind of guy are you on the craps table, sir?
There's a guy on my team, Ed Tom, who wrote this fixed decomposition paper, which, I've been talking to you about, and hopefully we'll get him on the show at some point. He's a huge fan of craps, and he taught me how to play the pass and then do the side bets and then bet the inside. And I've had a lot of fun with it. So
craps is fun.
Maybe I'll play a little craps out there.
I haven't played in a while. Now I'm getting the hanker into. Maybe I'll see you in the Vegas Summit next week, Uncle or Mr. Flowmaster. In the meantime, where should folks go if they want more Cboe goodness, sir?
Just head over to Cboe.com/RMA, which stands for Risk and Market Analytics. That's where we've got our data sets from DataShop and our platforms, including Trade Alert, LiveVol, Silex, FT Options. and the Cboe.com website in general. We've got some great content there, so check it out.
Check it out, indeed. I remember I had the same impact when I first came out to Chicago. I was the infector. I was the vector of the virus. I taught my whole trading firm how to play craps, and they all became addicted. And we went out to the casinos pretty much, and the boats at the time every weekend pretty much. It was a fun time, but I digress. Mr. Uncle Mike, are you a craps guy or roulette, or are you like one of those dudes who likes to pretend he's cool and he puts his sunglasses on at the poker table because he's been watching too much World Series of Poker? What kind of guy are you at the casino? And B, where should folks go if they want more Uncle Mike goodness?
Well, actually, my brother is a craps dealer, so fun fact about
Really?
Uncle Mike.
Oh.
Yes, not many people know that. Well, I guess anyone
He
who knows
works
me
the
and my-
stick. Has he given you any tips or tricks?
all sorts of tricks. So with that, I can't say I'm an expert by any means, but he talks to me about craps. I talk to him about options. He actually likes trading collars in the option world, but nonetheless, if you would like to learn more about what I do in the financial realm as a financial advisor, head to stcharleswealth.com. Book an appointment with me. Would love to have a conversation with any of our listeners.
I'll have to go find Uncle Mike's brother's table, see if I can get a special deal on the odds. I'll whisper.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure he could do that, no problem.
I'll whisper.
I'm sure the bosses would love
I know
that.
Uncle Mike, and he's like, "Oh, it's 5-1 for you."
Yeah.
All right, in the meantime, check them out, stcharleswealth.com. That's going to do it for us right now. Back again in about 30 minutes for all things TWIFO. And then back again after that, no rest for the wicked or the oral surgery impaired for a little bit of the hot options report. Back again tomorrow. Who's going to join us on Vol Views? We got to tune in to find out. And then after that, one final time for the old options oddities exclusively for our pro friends. If you want to get more info on that, theoptionsinsider.com/pro. Speaking of all our pro friends, good luck in the fantasy battle. It begins tonight. The draft was a fun time, and the first blood will be shed tonight with the first kickoff. So good luck to everyone, except Uncle Mike. And we'll see you back here on Monday, another episode of The Option Block. Stay safe out there, everybody.
The Option Block is brought to you by Cboe. Cboe's suite of S&P 500 index options, SPX and mini S&P 500 XSP options, allows traders to speculate on the direction of the market, generate income, and hedge for downside protection of their portfolio of stocks. No matter what kind of trader you are, there's plenty of useful information to take the guesswork out of creating your portfolio strategy and to help you make more educated moves in the market. Visit www.cboe.com/SPX today to learn more. The views expressed herein are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views of Cboe Global Markets Incorporated or any of its subsidiaries, collectively Cboe. The information provided is for general education and information purposes only. There are important risks associated with transacting in any of the Cboe products or any of the digital assets discussed here. Before engaging in any transactions in those products or digital assets, it is important for market participants to carefully review the disclosures and disclaimers contained at www.cboe.com/US_disclaimers. These products and digital assets are complex and are suitable only for sophisticated market participants. These products involve the risk of loss, which can be substantial and, depending on the type of product, can exceed the amount of money deposited in establishing the position. Market participants should put at risk only funds they can afford to lose without affecting their lifestyle. You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.